In this last video, we're going to take a look at the first major conflict in the war between the states, and that was the Battle of Bull Run, which is also sometimes called First Manassas. It actually occurred at a place called Bull Run that's also called Manassas. There would be two battles fought there, which is why this one is known as First Manassas. Well, it was fought on July 21st, 1861. And it began when the general for the Union, a man by the name of Irwin McDowell, led his force of roughly 35,000 Union soldiers south, but he led them to a very superior position at Bull Run. Now, he was opposed by the Confederate general Pierre Beauregard. And Beauregard was a man of great confidence. He was a man who had actually been trained by some of Napoleon's ex-officers at a great school, had been brought up speaking French until roughly the age of 12, was a man who was very refined and well-studied and seen as European, and was a little bit full of himself because of that as well, but he had already won at Fort Sumter, and he would ultimately be credited with winning this battle as well. He was actually given roughly the same force as his attacker. He had about 33,000 that had been reinforced by railroad, the first time we know of that happening in the history of the modern world. But this battle, which was going to be somewhat equally matched, really gave people, or the civilians particularly, a taste of what the war was going to look like, and it was not a pleasant one. In fact, many of the wealthy from the Washington, D.C. area and from Virginia and the parts around that area had come in their carriages, many of them with picnics, to watch the battle, to watch men die, because surely they would have known that people were going to die that day. But they thought that this battle would be kind of a pleasant entertainment, I suppose, for the morning and afternoon, until, of course, the cannons began to fire a little bit too close to the carriages, and the people fled for their lives. Still, as the battle went on, it was quickly realized that the Confederate army led by Beauregard was being defeated by McDowell, who was outflanking him. In fact, Beauregard had planned that McDowell should attack at a certain point, because that's what he would do. And McDowell foiled his plan because he didn't attack the way that Beauregard wanted him to attack. It's very rare that your enemy does what you want him to do. Well, it would have looked as if the Confederacy would have lost this day had it not been for Jackson, who was in charge of the 1st Virginia Brigade. He was a brigadier general at this time, decided that he would march his men from the Shenandoah Valley over the Blue Ridge Mountains some 20 miles in a single day without much rest at all to assist the Confederacy at this battle. Well, he came over there, and Jackson, who had been called things such as Tom Fool Jackson because of the way that he taught his classes, and who led an army that came, curiously enough, in a myriad of different uniforms. In fact, the movie Gods and Generals does a great job of showing what the army probably looked like, because they're dressed in everything from traditional Union-looking uniforms to traditional homespun to various red colors, or to even old-style War of Independence uniforms. In other words, it was an army that had as much diversity as the states' right cause which they represented. Well, Jackson still came with about 2,500 of these men, and they rushed into the battle on the flank where the Union was beginning to defeat the Confederacy. Jackson was obeying nobody's orders. He just heard the battle was thickest there, and so that is where he went. He ran to the hardest part of the fight. It was there that he stayed on his horse while his men took cover. They began to provide fire for the retreating Confederates so they could regroup. Jackson, though, took his position proudly in the horse. He was actually shot. Actually, a minie ball broke a finger in his hand, but he continued on in the battle on horse while men around him fell to the fire that you would have thought would have defeated him. It's one of those moments where you see that Jackson might seem to be foolish or rash, but quite honestly, he was a man who believed in providence. He believed that he would die on time. And so if he was supposed to die that day, he would, and if he wasn't, he wouldn't. As a result, General Bee, one of the Confederate generals, seeing that Jackson was standing there, told his man, "See Jackson standing there like a stone wall. Rally behind him." This, of course, would actually win him that name of Stonewall, but it also won the battle. In fact, Beauregard, who was able to claim credit for winning Bull Run, even though it was really Jackson's response, was able to always look at this as being one of his proudest moments, because it really was Jackson's proudest. But what's curious, perhaps most about this event, is what occurred immediately after the battle. It was immediately after that Jackson requested to his superiors, to Beauregard, and actually some 4 different times to whoever he could within the Confederate military or government. He requested that he be given another 5,000 soldiers, along with his 1st Virginia Brigade, and that they march immediately north to Washington, D.C., which was unguarded. And there, they forced the president to actually end the war. In fact, McClellan, who would become the Union General after McDowell and after this event, said that had he been given this, it probably would have happened because there was essentially no real defense. However, the South at this time saw the war as being entirely defensive. And so Jackson's request for this attack, for this daring way to end the war early, was actually completely denied. In other words, they really failed to see his argument that attacking like this and ending the war was a form of self-defense. It was actually a form of justice because it would cause an early end to the war by getting rid of what he saw as an unjust war in the very first place. So it really was a lost opportunity for the Confederacy, but it also showed the Union how costly and how committed to conquest they would have to be. And that really is the beginning of the great battles and the great tragedy of the war between the states.